My name's Michael. I'm 58 years old, and I've lived in the same Ohio town my whole damn life. I worked until my back screamed and my name meant nothing. They made me believe I owed them my life. And when I finally stopped showing up, they sent threats. But I had one last lesson to give them: how a man becomes unbreakable.
My dad built houses and my mom cleaned them. The first time I touched a hammer, I was 7. By the time I turned 18, I had a full-time job pouring concrete, laying bricks, and patching up roofs for men who barely remembered my name. I never questioned the path. Not once. You don't do that when your old man comes home with cracked hands and a busted back but still makes it to every shift. You don't dare say, "I want something else." Around here, work is your pride, your church, your inheritance. And if you don't take it seriously, someone else will. So I did what I was supposed to. I married my high school sweetheart, Carla. Got a little house on Woodmere Avenue, fixed it up after hours. Worked construction during the day, flipped burgers at night for a while when Carla got pregnant with our first, Jordan. Took overtime when I could get it, started putting money into a savings account we didn't touch for the kids' college, she'd say, smiling like we'd already made it. I didn't drink much, didn't go out, didn't complain. The plan was simple. Work hard. Get your house. Raise your kids. Retire with enough left over to maybe take a road trip through the Rockies before the knees give out. That's the blueprint. It's what every man I knew followed or tried to. I was 29 when I got promoted to site manager for Everidge Build Co. First time I ever felt like my name meant something. Wore a hard hat with foreman on the side. Didn't think much about pride back then, but when Carla kissed me that night, held my face in her hands and said, "We're gonna be okay, Mike," I believed her. I gave Everidge everything. I showed up early, left late, took the fall for mistakes that weren't mine. Said yes, sir, to bosses half my age who'd never seen a poured foundation crack in real time. I stayed when others left. Worked through pneumonia one winter because we were behind schedule. Blew out my shoulder trying to stop a falling steel beam and never filed the claim because we couldn't afford the paperwork delay. But the real damage wasn't to the body. Not really. It was what I didn't see happening, what I let happen. While I was chasing every goddamn expectation handed to me like gospel, Carla's smile turned tight. Jordan didn't go to college, said he didn't want to end up like me, tired and invisible. Our daughter left for Arizona and stopped calling back. Still, I stayed the course. Because when you've built a life around being dependable, you don't just up and become someone else. Then came the heart attack. I was 54. It hit me on site, laying rebar in the heat. I remember gripping the edge of a cement mixer, the sound of someone yelling, and then nothing but light. The ER visit wiped out most of our savings. We had health insurance, but the deductibles, hell, what's the point in paying for coverage that doesn't cover what actually matters? I took 2 weeks off. 2. Because we couldn't afford longer and because deep down I thought, if I'm not working, I'm nothing. It was around then I started waking up in cold sweats, stomach in knots, mind spiraling through regrets like loose nails. Carla started sleeping on the couch more often. And I told myself it was just the stress. That lie lasted until the night she left. No screaming. No crying. Just a note on the fridge. "You were always there for everyone but me. I can't do this anymore." 29 years undone in 12 words. And still, I went to work the next morning. The first time I looked in the mirror and saw what I'd become, a man hollowed out by duty, chasing approval that never came, I wanted to punch the glass. I didn't. I just looked. For a long time. I wasn't angry at Carla. I wasn't even angry at the kids. I was angry at me for being a good soldier in someone else's war. They told me who to be and I listened. They told me what a man looks like, what he does, and I followed the blueprint. I built a life that wasn't mine. But something snapped that morning. Not a breakdown. Not tears. Just a flick of recognition in my chest like a busted wire finally catching fire. I didn't shave. Didn't make breakfast. Didn't even lace my boots. I just sat there, staring at my calloused hands. And for the first time in 40 years, I whispered, "What if I stopped?" I didn't call the site manager. Didn't tell anyone. I just didn't show up. That was the first time I'd missed a day of work without a damn good reason since I was 16. Not even when I got stitched up after taking a shard of glass to the thigh on the Lakeview build in '03. Back then I went home, bandaged myself, and clocked in the next morning with a limp and a lie. But this time, nothing. I sat on the front porch with a black coffee and the rustle of the oak tree above me, wondering how it took me nearly 60 years to realize I'd been living like a man already buried. The phone buzzed before noon. 3 missed calls. Then a text. Everything okay? You sick? Dave, site foreman. I stared at it a while, then tossed the phone into the grass. What could I say? I'm fine, Dave. Just realized I don't exist outside this job. Just figured out I traded my entire life for overtime and applause that never came. That kind of honesty doesn't fly in our world. I went back inside, opened the closet, and stared at the shelves of work boots I'd worn down to leather ghosts, stacks of company shirts, branded jackets from cold winter builds. Every item a trophy from a life I thought meant something. Now they just looked like evidence. Like I'd been part of a cult I didn't know I joined. The second text came at 3:45. This one from my supervisor's assistant. Hey Mike, they need your permit approval signed off by tomorrow or corporate is gonna flag the timeline. You good? I deleted the message. It was strange how quiet the house was now. Carla had taken most of the furniture when she left, except the recliner and the table I built when we were young and broke and stupidly in love. I sat at that table, stared at the scratches in the wood from where Jordan used to slam down his cereal spoon like a damn jackhammer. I tried to feel something, regret, anger, nostalgia, but there was nothing. Just a dull throb behind my ribs and a question looping in my head like a broken drill. What did I do all this for? The day wore on. I didn't eat. Didn't turn on the TV, didn't open the blinds, just sat there watching the light shift across the walls, wondering how many years I'd spent doing what everyone else needed me to do, expected me to do without once asking what I wanted. I thought about that heart attack, the one that should have been my wake-up call. I remembered the smell of antiseptic, the way the nurse called me Mr. Bell, like she already knew I was someone who'd never say no. Someone who'd take a prescription, a bill, and a discharge paper and just nod like a good little soldier. I remembered the look in Carla's eyes when I told her I was going back to work early. That quiet, resigned disappointment. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. She'd already stopped believing I'd ever change. And maybe she was right. That night, I walked 3 miles to the old stone bridge by the quarry. The place we used to drink beer in high school when the nights were too hot and the town too small. I stood on that bridge and looked down into the black water, wondering what kind of man I'd be if I let go of everything. Not jump, not disappear. Just let go of the version of myself I'd clung to for so long. The worker, the provider, the doer. What if I was something else? What if I could finally be the man I was instead of the man everyone else expected? The thought terrified me. I walked home in the dark. The next morning I called HR. Hi, this is Mike Bell. I need to speak with someone about retirement. Early retirement? The woman asked. Something like that, I said. She paused, probably checking my age, my years in. You're eligible for partial, reduced payout. I don't care, I said. Send the forms. And just like that, 37 years of sweat, pain, and obedience became paperwork. I didn't tell anyone, didn't throw a party, didn't even tell Carla. It didn't matter. I hadn't quit the job. I quit being who they told me to be. That weekend, I drove out to my brother's cabin in West Virginia. I hadn't seen Ben in 6 years. Last time we talked was after Mom's funeral. He'd always been the black sheep, moved out west, lived in a trailer for a while, fixed motorcycles, never had a plan. He opened the door, older, scruffier than I remembered. Well, I'll be damned, he said. You finally took a vacation, or did you get fired? Neither, I said. I stayed a week, sat by the fire, walked in the woods, chopped wood until my shoulders ached, said maybe 10 words a day. And every night when the stars came out, I felt a little more like a person and a little less like a machine. Ben didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He knew what I was doing. I was mourning a man I'd never really been. and trying to figure out what the hell to do with the man I might become. When I got back from West Virginia, the town looked different. Not physically. Same cracked sidewalks, same burnt-out Dollar General sign near 5th and Carson. But something had shifted in me. I'd lived here my whole life, and I'd never noticed how small everything felt when you weren't rushing from shift to shift. The gas station guy even asked if I was okay. "I heard you were out," he said. "You sick?" I just shook my head. "Nah, just done." He blinked like I'd spoken another language. Maybe I had. I started walking more. Not for fitness, not for anything noble, just to move without a destination. I passed the site where I poured my first slab with Everidge. It was a coffee shop now. Bright chairs. Brick patio. A place for young people in clean clothes to sip drinks with foam leaves drawn on top. No one remembered what used to be there. But I did. I remembered busting my thumb on the second day and wrapping it in duct tape so I wouldn't get pulled off the job. I remembered laying foundation while Carla waited at home, 8 months pregnant, watching the weather like it was an omen. That sidewalk was mine. That corner, my sweats in that concrete. And now it's sold scones. I stood there for maybe 20 minutes, just watching people live lives I didn't recognize. I didn't hate them for it. I just didn't know how I ended up on the other side of the glass. Back home, I opened a drawer Carla used to call the someday drawer. Vacation brochures, coupons for cabins we never rented, a folded flyer about an art class she wanted us to take before the kids moved out. I found her handwriting on the corner of one. Maybe when we finally stopped chasing money. That broke something loose in me. It wasn't just the job that robbed me of life. It was the fear. The belief that if I didn't show up, I'd disappear. That if I didn't earn more, we'd fall apart. I told myself all those years I was doing it for her, for the kids. But now, looking at that drawer, I saw the truth. I was working for ghosts. Not just my dad's memory. Not just my own pride. But for every version of me that believed pain was the only honest currency a man had. And still, I was angry. Angry at Carla for leaving. Angry at my son for calling me a ghost in my own house. But most of all, angry at myself for letting it all pass by while I kept my head down.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing experience, but we really need your support, namely a subscription to the channel, which can make it possible to hire a professional voice actor and make the best content for you.
So I got to work again. Not for money. Not for anyone else. I drove to the hardware store and bought 2x4s, paint, a second-hand table saw. Built a shed behind the house. Then a bench. Then a new porch swing, the one Carla always wanted. Took me 4 tries to get the stain right, but when I finished it, I sat on it until sunrise. I'd never built anything for me before. It was like learning to breathe again. Word got around like it always does in a small town. A neighbor asked if I could fix her porch steps. Another needed help replacing a screen door. I didn't say no. Didn't ask for money either. It wasn't charity. It was penance. For all the time I gave to a company that tossed me a branded windbreaker and forgot my name. One morning, I ran into Dave, my old site manager, outside the diner. "Hell, Mike," he said, "you drop off the map?" "I walked off it," I said. He laughed like it was a joke. "It wasn't. You should come back. Guys are asking about you. They're drowning without a real foreman. That new kid, Bradley, he's got no idea what he's doing." I looked him in the eye and said, "That's not my problem anymore." He blinked. Like I'd disappointed him somehow. I didn't care. Not because I'd changed that much, but because I finally realized I didn't owe anyone my bones just because they'd learned to lean on them. And that's when the idea hit me. Something I hadn't dared think about in years. My own shop. Not big. Not fancy. Just a converted garage space out on the edge of town where I could build things with my hands and teach other men, real working men, how to do it too. Not for profit. For purpose. A place to show them they were more than what they carried on their backs. That night, I sketched it out on a napkin like I was 25 again. Labeled tools I didn't own. Wrote out a supply list. Wrote out names of men I'd worked with, men who never got a fair shot, men who still thought they had to bleed to be worth something. It wasn't a dream. It was a reckoning. I spent the next month in that half-dead garage I rented off an old guy named Raymond who hadn't raised the rent since the Clinton years. It had one working light, a cracked concrete floor, and a wasp nest the size of a basketball hanging from the rafters. I cleared it out with a shovel, patched the wiring, swept every inch of that place twice. And then I stood there for a while, listening to the echo of my own breath and wondering what the hell I thought I was doing. I wasn't a businessman. Wasn't a teacher. Hell, I wasn't even sure if I had anything left in me worth sharing. But I knew one thing. I didn't want to die with my name tied only to buildings I didn't own and schedules I didn't control. I wanted to build something that was mine. I put up a flyer in the laundromat. Want to learn how to build something real? First class free. Saturdays, 9 a.m. No experience needed. I didn't expect much. But that first Saturday, 2 people showed up. One was a guy named Freddie, laid off from the tire plant, and the other was a quiet kid named Andre, 19, no direction, just wanted something to do with his hands. I showed them how to build a sawhorse. Not fancy, but precise. I taught them to measure twice, to listen to the grain, to square the edge, not just eyeball it. I watched their hands shake a little, then settle. I saw the same hunger in their faces that I used to have when someone finally trusted me with a real tool. They came back the next week, brought friends. By the end of the month, we had 6 folding chairs and a rotation of 10 guys. It wasn't a business, but it was becoming something better. A place where nobody had to prove anything to be worth something. Word spread. I started getting calls. Local vet center. A counselor from a halfway house. Even a church group. They all asked the same thing. Could you take on one more? I always said yes. Meanwhile, I kept building. Coffee tables, chairs, porch swings. Nothing fancy, but people started offering to buy them. I didn't sell much. Just enough to cover the cost of materials. That wasn't the point. The point was I was making something that couldn't be taken away from me. But not everyone liked it. One afternoon, I got a visit from Dave again. Pulled up in his company truck while I was sweeping sawdust out the doorway. Mike, he said, stepping out, we need to talk. I kept sweeping. You walked out. Fine. I didn't fight you. But this? Teaching guys how to swing hammers in your own backyard. I looked up. You worried they'll stop showing up for you? He didn't answer. That's what scares you, isn't it? That they'll realize they've been giving away their lives for a logo on a hat and a Christmas bonus that doesn't even cover a tire rotation. You're bitter, he snapped. No, I said calmly. I'm awake. He left without saying another word. That night I sat on my porch swing, looking out over the town as the sky turned the color of rust. I thought about how much of my life I'd spent waiting for someone to tell me I'd done enough. And now, in this dusty old garage, with no payroll, no health insurance, no retirement plan, I finally felt whole. Then I got the letter. A plain envelope in the mailbox. Return address, Everidge Corporate. Inside was a notice. Cease and desist. They were claiming my workshop name, Foundations, violated their trademark. Said it was too similar to Everidge Foundation's training program, a corporate thing they'd rolled out a year ago that taught interns how to take orders and not ask questions. It was petty, but that's what systems like theirs do. They find men who walk away and they try to remind them who holds the leash. I didn't panic. I didn't fold. I went to my guys the next Saturday, handed them the letter, and told them they want me to stop. What do you want? Freddie raised his hand, calloused and cracked. Let's build a new sign. So we did. Took down the old name. Hung a new one. The second nail. Because sometimes it's not the first swing that matters. It's the one after you've been told to stop. The new sign changed something, not just the name, but the spirit of the place. The second nail didn't sound like a business. It sounded like a story. And every man who walked through that garage door carried one of his own. There was Henry, a welder who hadn't picked up a torch since his DUI 3 years ago. There was Glenn, who used to run drywall crews before the accident took his leg. And Andre, the kid with no dad and too much silence behind his eyes, who stayed late every Saturday and cleaned without being asked. They came not just to learn but to remember what it felt like to matter. And I came to forget who I'd been. It wasn't charity. It was survival. But word kept spreading. Faster than I was ready for. One afternoon I got a knock on the garage door. It was Karen West, local reporter from Channel 6. She wanted to do a feel-good segment. Said folks needed stories about hope. I'm not in the business of hope, I told her. She smiled. You might be the only one in town who actually is. I let her film. She was kind. Didn't twist my words. The piece aired a week later. 5 minutes of footage showing cracked hands shaping clean joints. Quiet men learning to breathe again. I thought nothing of it. But then I got a voicemail from Carla. It was the first time I'd heard her voice in nearly a year. "You look good," she said. "I just wanted you to know." That was all. I didn't call her back. Not because I was angry, but because there are some bridges you don't rebuild. Not because they burned down, but because they were built wrong from the start. And yet, the attention kept coming. More folks showed up. Local businesses donated tools. A church covered a new saw. Someone started a GoFundMe without telling me. It raised enough to insulate the garage and add 2 more workbenches. It was real now. So of course, that's when the past came knocking. A man named Richard Blaine showed up on a Tuesday afternoon. Slacks, blazer, shiny shoes that had never touched a job site. He said he worked for Everidge's legal team. "We've received reports you're using proprietary methods," he said, pulling out a thin folder. "Instructional materials based on company documents." I laughed in his face. "You mean teaching men how to square a board and drive a nail? Those proprietary methods?" He didn't smile. "This is your final warning." I opened the garage door real slow. Let the afternoon light pour in over the sawdust and sweat. "You gonna tell these men they can't build their own lives?" I asked. He looked around. Saw them all standing behind me. Silent. Solid. He left. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from fear. From fury. Not at the company. Not even at the suits. But at myself for giving them so much of me that they still thought they owned my time, my voice, my skills. They don't just take your labor. They take your belief that you can be anything else. And I was done letting them have that. So I made a decision. A quiet one. I gathered every award, every branded vest, every paper certificate Everidge ever sent me. I packed them into a wooden crate. Drove out to the quarry where the old steel plant used to be. The same place I'd nearly dropped dead 4 years ago. And I lit the box on fire. Watched the flames lick 30 years of obedience into ash. Watched the plaques curl and the plastic melt. It wasn't revenge. It was a funeral. For the man I used to be. I stood there until the fire died. Then I drove back to town. And started writing something I'd never dared before. A handbook. The Second Nail, a guide for men who've given everything and need to take something back. The handbook took 3 months to write. Not because it was long. It wasn't. It was precise. Simple. Built like the men it was meant for. 12 chapters. One for each thing I wish someone had told me before I spent 40 years grinding myself into bone dust. Titles like "No One's Coming to Say Thank You" and "If You Don't Own It, You'll Die for It Anyway." I wrote it the way I spoke. No fluff. No metaphors. Just hard truths nailed to real experience. Andre helped me format it. Freddie found a printer. Glenn insisted on adding a dedication page. For the men who gave too much and never got it back until now. We handed it out for free to every man who walked into the shop. I watched them run their fingers down the cover like it might bite. Some of them tucked it away like something precious. Others read a few lines, closed it, and just sat still. You could see it in their faces. They'd been waiting to hear someone tell the truth. Then one day, my son came back. I hadn't heard from Jordan in over a year. Last I knew, he was bouncing between jobs out west, fixing HVAC systems and avoiding any calls longer than 5 minutes. He showed up on a Saturday, parked 2 blocks down, walked in like he wasn't sure if I'd let him stay. I didn't hug him. I didn't cry. I handed him a hammer and pointed to a stack of boards. "You remember how to make a clean edge?" He nodded. We didn't say much. Didn't need to. He stayed until sundown and then some. When he left, he said, "Mom was right." I braced myself. "She said you'd figure it out. Just took you a little longer." I stood on that gravel drive for a long time after he pulled away. Because for once, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of a failed blueprint. I felt like I was writing my own. And maybe that was the real revenge. Not a fiery collapse of a company. Not lawsuits or screaming matches. But survival with purpose. See, Everidge doesn't even know they lost. They're still drafting fake training manuals and offering plaques to new hires who'll burn out in 5 years. They're still selling the lie that your worth comes from how long you can keep your mouth shut while your back breaks. But me? I've got 30 men every week who know how to drive a nail and hold their heads up. I've got a shop where no one's invisible. I've got a handbook that says what no boss ever will. This isn't just about building with your hands. It's about rebuilding what they stole from your soul. So yeah, I didn't get a retirement party, didn't get a gold watch or a farewell cake, but I got my life back. And that's more than most men like me ever believe is possible. If you ask me now what I do, I won't say retired. I'll say I fix what they broke. Looking back, my greatest enemy was never a man. It wasn't my boss or my ex-wife or even the company that forgot my name. It was the version of myself I thought I had to be. And the day I burned his legacy was the day I started breathing like a man who finally belonged to himself. Because real revenge isn't about making them pay. It's about making sure they never get to take another piece of you again.
What do you think of the story? Write in the comments.